The year was 1563, and the plague had swept through the small village of Thornfield like a vengeful spirit, leaving devastation in its wake. Rose Thatcher stood at the edge of her meager vegetable plot, her slender fingers wrapped around the handle of a worn hoe. At 22, she had already endured more hardship than most faced in a lifetime. The plague had claimed her husband just 6 months after their wedding, along with her parents and younger sister. Rose paused to wipe the sweat from her brow, her golden blonde hair escaping from beneath her simple linen cap. Despite her poverty, her beauty remained undimmed. High cheekbones, luminous blue eyes, and full lips that rarely smiled these days. Her threadbare dress, once her mother's, hung loosely on her frame, the neckline frayed and lower than propriety might suggest, revealing her delicate collarbone and hints of the feminine curves beneath. The coarse fabric could not disguise her natural grace, a fact that had not gone unnoticed by the wealthier men of the village. "Mama," a small voice called out, breaking the silence. 5-year-old Thomas, her son, came running across the yard, his cheeks flushed with excitement. The boy was the spitting image of his father, with the same dark curls and earnest expression. "Mama, a man on a horse." Rose straightened, automatically reaching to adjust her bodice. Visitors were rare, especially those on horseback. The lane that led to their humble cottage was seldom traveled these days, now that she lived alone with Thomas at the very edge of the village. The rider approached slowly, his fine clothing immediately marking him as someone of importance. Rose felt a flutter of apprehension. In these difficult times, a woman alone was vulnerable to all manner of threats. "Are you Mistress Rose Thatcher?" the man asked, dismounting with the practiced ease of one accustomed to riding. "I am," she replied, instinctively pulling Thomas closer to her side. "I bring word from the solicitor in Norwich. Your great-uncle, Bartholomew Thatcher, has passed on. As his only surviving kin, you have inherited his property." Rose blinked in surprise. "Great-uncle Bartholomew? I never knew of him." "He was a recluse, my lady. Lived far from here, near the fens. He left everything to his closest blood relation, which is you." The man handed her a sealed letter. "The details are all within. The solicitor expects you within the fortnight to claim your inheritance." As quickly as he had appeared, the messenger departed, leaving Rose standing in her yard, the letter clutched in her trembling hand. That night, after putting Thomas to bed, she carefully broke the seal and read the contents by candlelight. Her great-uncle had left her a cottage and a small parcel of land in the fens, some 30 miles distant. There was a crude map included, showing the location of the property at the end of a lonely track, surrounded by marsh and woodland. Rose spent the night in contemplation. Life in Thornfield had become increasingly difficult. The new lord of the manor had made his interest in her clear, interest of the kind no respectable widow would entertain. Perhaps this unexpected inheritance, humble though it might be, offered a chance to start anew. 3 days later, with their few possessions loaded into a handcart, Rose and Thomas set off toward their new home. The journey was arduous, particularly through the marshy terrain of the fens. When they finally arrived at the cottage, Rose's heart sank. The structure was little more than a ruin. The thatched roof sagged dangerously, with gaping holes exposed to the elements. The wooden door hung askew on rusted hinges, and ivy had claimed much of the exterior walls. The surrounding land was even less promising, boggy in places, overgrown with reeds and marsh grasses, with a stagnant pond that looked more like a mud pit. "Is this our new home, Mama?" Thomas asked, his voice small. Rose forced a smile. "It is, my love. And we shall make it beautiful again." That first night, they huddled together in the one corner of the cottage where the roof remained intact. Rose fought back tears as she held her sleeping son. What kind of inheritance was this? A crumbling hovel surrounded by useless marshland? It seemed her great-uncle's final act had been a cruel joke. The next morning, as Rose attempted to clear some of the debris from the cottage floor, Thomas ventured outside to explore. She kept a watchful eye on him through the broken window as he skipped around the perimeter of the property. Suddenly, his excited voice rang out.
"Mama! Mama!
Look what I found. Rose hurried outside to find Thomas crouched by the edge of the muddy pond, pointing excitedly at something in the reeds. Be careful, Thomas. Do not get too close to the water, she warned. But look, Mama. It is moving. Rose approached cautiously, then gasped. There, barely visible in the mud, was a tiny kitten, its fur so caked with muck that its color was indiscernible. It mewled weakly, clearly exhausted from trying to free itself from the sucking mud. Oh, you poor creature, Rose murmured, carefully lifting the kitten from its predicament. It was so small it fit in the palm of her hand. Thomas, fetch some clean water from our barrel. We must wash this little one before it catches its death. Together, they gently cleaned the mud from the kitten's fur, revealing a coat of the purest white, with unusual markings around its eyes that resembled a mask. The kitten's eyes, when they blinked open, were a startling shade of blue. Can we keep him, Mama? Please? Thomas begged. Rose hesitated. Another mouth to feed was the last thing they needed. And yet, we shall see how he fares. He is very weak. Over the next few days, as Rose worked tirelessly to make the cottage habitable, the kitten regained its strength. Thomas named it Ghost, for its white fur and silent way of moving. The boy and the kitten became inseparable companions, with Thomas carrying the small creature everywhere in the pocket of his smock. A week after their arrival, Rose was startled by a knock at the door. She opened it to find a stern-looking man in expensive but practical clothing. Mistress Thatcher? He inquired, his gaze traveling over her in a way that made her uncomfortably aware of her disheveled appearance and the low cut of her worn dress. Yes, I am she. William Quincy, at your service. I manage the neighboring estate for Lord Hartwell. He gestured vaguely toward the west. I was informed of your arrival and thought to pay a neighborly visit. There was something in his tone that set Rose on edge. His words were polite, but his eyes were calculating. That is most kind, she replied cautiously. I must say, I am surprised to see anyone taking up residence here. Old Bartholomew was peculiar, kept to himself, never allowed visitors. William glanced around, taking in the dilapidated state of the property. I should inform you that Lord Hartwell has expressed interest in acquiring this land. He would pay a fair price, more than fair, considering its condition. Before Rose could respond, Thomas appeared at her side, Ghost perched on his shoulder. William Quincy's reaction was immediate and startling. His face drained of color, and he took an involuntary step backward. Where did you get that creature? He demanded, his voice harsh. Thomas shrank against Rose's skirts. I saved him from the mud. His name is Ghost. William's eyes narrowed. That is no ordinary cat, boy. That is a Russian white, a breed so rare it is said only the Tsar himself keeps them. They are worth a fortune to the right collector. Rose looked at the small kitten with disbelief. Surely you jest, sir. This is merely a stray.
No jest, madam.
And I find it highly suspicious that such a creature would be found here, of all places. His tone had grown accusatory. Old Bartholomew was rumored to have connections far beyond these shores. Connections that would be of great interest to certain parties. He reached for the kitten, but Ghost hissed and swiped at his hand, drawing blood with tiny but sharp claws. Damn the beast! William exclaimed, withdrawing his hand. His expression darkened. Consider my lord's offer carefully, Mistress Thatcher. This land is worth little, but he is prepared to be generous. I shall return for your answer in 3 days' time. After he departed, Rose closed the door and leaned against it, her heart racing. What an odd encounter, she murmured, looking at Ghost with newfound curiosity. The kitten gazed back at her with those intelligent blue eyes. That night, unable to sleep, Rose decided to explore the cottage more thoroughly. Perhaps there was something here worth salvaging after all. In what must have once been her great-uncle's bedchamber, she found a loose floorboard beneath a rotting rug. Prying it up, she discovered a small wooden box. Inside was a journal, its leather binding cracked with age, and a curious medallion made of silver, engraved with symbols she did not recognize. Rose opened the journal and began to read by candlelight. The entries, dating back some 20 years, revealed that Bartholomew Thatcher had not always been a recluse. In his younger days, he had traveled extensively as a merchant, venturing as far as Moscow and Constantinople. The journal spoke of rare goods, secret trade routes, and dealings with noble houses across Europe. As dawn broke, Rose was still reading, entranced by the life her great-uncle had led. One entry in particular caught her attention. The Duchess has entrusted me with her most valuable possession, not for sale, but for safekeeping. The political climate in Russia grows dangerous for those with foreign connections. She believes her husband's enemies will seize her assets. The breeding pair is worth more than most men will see in a lifetime. I have hidden them where none would think to look, in plain sight, yet invisible. Rose looked up from the journal to find Ghost sitting on the windowsill, watching her intently. Could it be possible? Was this kitten somehow connected to her great-uncle's mysterious past? The following day, Thomas and Ghost disappeared for several hours, sending Rose into a panic. She found them eventually by the pond, where Thomas was digging enthusiastically in the mud at the water's edge.
Thomas.
"What are you doing?" "You are filthy," she scolded, relieved but exasperated. "Ghost keeps coming here, Mama. He scratches at the ground and cries. I thought maybe his mother was buried here." Rose glanced at the kitten, who was indeed pawing insistently at a particular spot near the water. Remembering the journal entry, she knelt beside her son. "Let me help you dig, Thomas." Together, they excavated the spot, eventually uncovering what appeared to be a small door set into the ground, cleverly disguised with mud and reeds. It took all of Rose's strength to pull it open, revealing a set of stone steps leading down into darkness. "Wait here," she instructed Thomas, lighting a candle and descending cautiously. The underground chamber was small but dry, its walls lined with shelves. Upon these shelves sat wooden crates and canvas-wrapped bundles. With trembling hands, Rose opened the nearest crate. She gasped at the contents, silks finer than any she had ever seen, jewel-toned, and embroidered with gold thread. Another crate held spices that filled the air with exotic fragrances. A third contained books with foreign titles and illustrations. In the center of the room stood a sturdy chest. Rose lifted the lid and immediately stepped back, momentarily blinded by the gleam of gold and precious stones. Necklaces, rings, brooches, and coins spilled out in a dazzling display of wealth. Beneath the jewelry lay a sealed letter addressed simply, "To my heir." Rose broke the seal and read, "If you are reading this, I am gone from this world, and you have discovered what I could not reveal in legal documents. These treasures represent a lifetime of trade with the noble houses of Europe and beyond. Some were payment for services rendered, others were entrusted to me for safekeeping during turbulent times. The most valuable asset, however, is not gold or jewels, but the breeding pair of Russian whites, cats so rare they are considered the property of the Russian royal family. Any kittens they produce are worth a king's ransom to the right buyer. They are my gift to you, along with everything else you find here.
Be wary.
There are those who have long suspected my secrets. Trust no one who shows undue interest in this property. May you use this inheritance wisely. Your kinsman, Bartholomew Thatcher." Rose climbed back up the steps, her mind reeling. When she emerged, she found Thomas playing with not one, but two white cats, Ghost and a slightly larger female with identical markings. "She came out of the reeds, Mama," Thomas explained excitedly. "I think she is Ghost's mother." Before Rose could respond, the sound of approaching horses reached them. Through the trees, she could see William Quincy returning, accompanied by several armed men. Rose quickly ushered Thomas and the cats into the cottage and closed the hidden door, brushing aside the evidence of their digging. "Mistress Thatcher," William called out as he dismounted, "I have returned for your answer regarding Lord Hartwell's offer." Rose stepped out of the cottage, careful to close the door behind her. She stood tall, her chin raised despite her humble attire. "I thank you for your lord's interest, Master Quincy, but I have decided to keep my inheritance." William's expression hardened. "I do not think you understand the situation. This land is worthless for farming. The cottage is barely standing. What possible reason could you have for refusing a generous offer? It is my home now, Rose replied simply. My son, and I will make our life here. And the cat? William pressed. The Russian white. Lord Hartwell is particularly interested in acquiring it. The stray my son found? It ran off yesterday. Rose lied smoothly. Back to the wild, I suppose. William's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Search the property, he ordered his men. Thoroughly. Rose watched with feigned confusion as the men spread out, examining the cottage and surrounding land. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she maintained a calm exterior. One man approached the pond, his boot steps dangerously close to the hidden door. I would not venture there, Rose called out. The ground is treacherous, quicksand in places. My son nearly lost his life yesterday when he wandered too close. The man hesitated, then stepped back, choosing instead to search along the perimeter of the property. After an hour of fruitless searching, William was visibly frustrated. This is not the end of the matter, Mistress Thatcher. Lord Hartwell will not be denied what he seeks. I am but a simple widow with a young son, Rose responded innocently. We have nothing of value here, only a roof over our heads such as it is. William mounted his horse, his expression dark. We shall see about that. I will return, and next time, I shall bring proper authority. As the men rode away, Rose hurried inside to find Thomas sitting on the floor with both white cats in his lap. Are the bad men gone, Mama? He asked anxiously. For now, my love. Rose knelt beside him, gently stroking Ghost's silky fur. But we must be careful. And I believe we have some decisions to make. That evening, after Thomas was asleep, Rose returned to the underground chamber to examine the treasure more carefully. Among the papers in the chest, she found detailed accounts of her great-uncle's dealings, including the names of noble families across Europe who had entrusted him with their valuables during times of political turmoil. Most significantly, she discovered letters from a Russian duchess, thanking Bartholomew for sheltering her prized Russian whites from those who would steal them for their immense value. The cats were living symbols of the duchess's status, bred exclusively for the Russian aristocracy. According to the letters, anyone found possessing such cats without royal permission faced severe punishment. Rose realized with growing alarm that Lord Hartwell must have known, or at least suspected, what Bartholomew had hidden here. Perhaps he had been watching the property, waiting for Bartholomew's death to claim the treasures for himself. Over the next 2 weeks, Rose enacted a careful plan. She traveled to Norwich, meeting discreetly with her great-uncle's solicitor, who proved to be an honest man. With his help, she established connections with trusted merchants who could help her sell the exotic goods at fair prices. The jewelry and gold were deposited with a reputable goldsmith, with arrangements for a monthly stipend to be paid to Rose. As for the cats, Rose made contact with a Russian merchant who acted as intermediary for the Duchess. A message was sent across the sea, informing the noblewoman that her precious cats were safe and had produced offspring. Meanwhile, Rose hired local workers to begin renovating the cottage, explaining that she had discovered a small inheritance from her husband hidden in their old home. The improvements were modest but significant: a new roof, repaired walls, a proper door. William Quincy returned as promised, this time accompanied by the sheriff. This woman is harboring stolen property, he declared. The Russian white cats are the rightful property of Lord Hartwell, who purchased them legally from a merchant in London. The sheriff, a practical man, looked skeptical. Do you have proof of this purchase, Master Quincy? William hesitated. The documentation is at Hartwell Manor. But I assure you, the cats were seen here by myself and others. I have no such cats, Rose stated firmly. Only a common mouser that keeps the vermin at bay. She had hidden Ghost and his mother in the secret chamber, leaving only an ordinary gray tabby visible in the cottage. The sheriff conducted a cursory search, but found nothing suspicious. I see no evidence of wrongdoing, Master Quincy. Unless Lord Hartwell wishes to present proper documentation of his claim, I cannot take action against this woman. William departed in a fury, promising retribution. But Rose was prepared. The following day, a messenger arrived from Norwich with a letter bearing an official seal. The letter, when Rose opened it, contained remarkable news. The Russian Duchess, grateful for the safe return of her cats, had arranged for Rose to be appointed as the official breeder and caretaker of the Russian whites in England. The appointment came with a royal patent and the protection of the Russian ambassador. Furthermore, Ghost, who was revealed to be a male of particularly fine lineage, was officially gifted to Thomas as his personal property, with the understanding that any offspring would be shared between the Thatcher family and the Duchess. When William Quincy returned yet again, this time with Lord Hartwell himself, Rose was ready. She presented the royal patent and the letter of protection from the Russian ambassador. Lord Hartwell, a corpulent man with small, calculating eyes, read the documents with mounting dismay. "This changes nothing," he blustered. "This land still falls within my hunting rights. I can make life very difficult for you, madam." "You may certainly try," Rose replied calmly. "However, I should mention that I have recently had correspondence with the Duchess Varvara Nikolaevna, who is most interested to learn that an English lord was claiming ownership of her cats. She has expressed a desire to discuss the matter personally with Queen Elizabeth, with whom she maintains a cordial relationship through the ambassador." The color drained from Lord Hartwell's face. "There has been a misunderstanding," he said hastily. "William must have confused these cats with others. We withdraw any claim immediately." As summer turned to autumn, Rose's circumstances transformed dramatically. The cottage was fully restored, with additional rooms added for comfort. The marshy land, under the guidance of experienced fenmen, was partially drained to create productive gardens, while leaving sufficient wetland for the local wildlife. Rose established a small but exclusive breeding program for the Russian whites, with kittens sent to noble houses across Europe, each accompanied by a letter of authentication from the Duchess. The income from this venture alone would have secured their future, but combined with the careful investment of her great-uncle's treasure, Rose and Thomas became wealthy beyond their wildest dreams. Yet they lived modestly, remembering their humble beginnings. Rose used much of their fortune to improve the lives of those in neighboring villages, establishing a school and providing support for widows and orphans affected by the plague. On the first anniversary of their arrival at the cottage, Rose and Thomas stood by the pond, which now sparkled clear and clean in the autumn sunlight. Ghost, no longer a tiny kitten but a magnificent cat, prowled regally along the water's edge. "Are we rich now, Mama?" Thomas asked, his small hand secure in hers. Rose smiled, watching as Ghost pounced playfully on a falling leaf. "We are rich in ways that matter, my love. We have a home, good health, and each other." She glanced toward the cottage, where a dozen white kittens tumbled and played in a specially constructed enclosure. "And yes, we are also rich in the way the world measures such things. All because you saved a muddy kitten from the pond." Thomas grinned proudly. Ghost knew where the treasure was. "He is a clever cat." "Indeed he is," Rose agreed, bending to stroke the cat's silky fur. "And we are fortunate that he chose us." As they walked back to the cottage, Rose reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. From desperate widow to prosperous businesswoman, all because of an inheritance that had seemed worthless at first glance. Her great-uncle had hidden his treasure where no one would think to look, in a dilapidated cottage surrounded by boggy fenland, and had protected it with his reputation as a reclusive eccentric. Now, that cleverly concealed fortune had given Rose and Thomas not just security, but a future filled with possibilities. And it had all begun with a muddy kitten rescued from the edge of a stagnant pond, which turned out to be worth more than anyone could have imagined.